The Las Vegas Grand Prix is supposed to be gunning for Monaco's place as the crown jewel of Formula One. But then again, so is Miami. And with their fake yachts sitting in a marina full of painted blue boards, they ended up being more like the Monaco we have at home, with some going so far as to compare the $42 sandwiches being sold in Miami to the cheese sandwiches that were handed out at Fyre Festival. So with 6 months between Miami and Vegas, you'd think that they would take that time to analyze what happened in Florida and to make sure that Vegas was an end-of-season tour de force spectacular. With $500 million invested, surely they'd be planning every detail meticulously to make sure that the experience was unrivaled and, at the very least, not something people would refer to as Fyre Festival 2.0. Right? Welcome to Fiends, where the F1 never ends, unlike Vegas, where it ends and you don't get a refund. The Las Vegas Grand Prix has never made sense to anyone outside of a coke-fueled board meeting because, let's be honest, the main appeal of the whole thing is, wouldn't it be cool to see F1 cars driving down the Las Vegas Strip? To make it make sense, you have to imagine you're a C-suite level executive, the kind whose entire life revolves around extracting wealth from the masses, completely devoid of any meaningful human connection. So you take regular trips to Las Vegas, where you can be the center of attention by placing roulette bets bigger than most people's annual salary. And that feeling of anticipation before the ball drops into the slot is the only thing that makes you feel alive. And that look of awe in people's eyes when they see how much money you just lost, without even being fazed, is the closest you'll ever get to being admired by other people. That's the kind of person who loves Vegas and thinks that Las Vegas makes anything better simply by being there. That's the kind of person who thinks a jug of milk costs $20 and doesn't realize that Vegas sucks if you're not rich. They don't notice that they've dropped $100 in tips today because they had to tip the cab driver and the guy who hailed the cab and the concierge at the hotel and the server at brunch, the dealer at the poker table, the waitress who brought drinks to the poker table, the street performer on the corner, and so on and so forth. That's the kind of guy who walks out onto the Vegas Strip feeling like a big shot and looks around at the city of sin built in the middle of the Nevada desert and doesn't see it as a testament to the arrogance of mankind. No, they see it as a monument to the excesses of capitalism. And because they've been winning at capitalism, they want to integrate it into anything they possibly can. So they spent $500 million making a racetrack that looks like a dead pig. Nearly half of that money went into purchasing the land for the pits and paddock, and you'd think $260 million would be more than enough to put on a great race. But I could tell they were hurting for money when, after the press conferences, Liberty Media president Greg Maffei was seen fishing down the couch for change. But what they failed to realize was that outside of Europe, there aren't that many diehard F1 fans who are willing to spend car money on a single weekend experience. If you thought the $10,000 ticket prices in Miami were crazy, then the Las Vegas GP packages were obviously insane to anybody who grew up without a trust fund, and actually made the $800 to $8,000 Fyre Festival tickets look downright reasonable by comparison. But nothing about this race was reasonable. They didn't even bother to check what the weather in Vegas is like at night in November, because if they had, they would have seen that it's typically below 10 degrees Celsius and obviously unsuitable for Formula One cars. This is some basic event planning shit, but unlike Fyre Festival, the event planner can't just offer to suck some guy off to fix it. As the race weekend was approaching, things were already looking bleak for the race. There were tons of tickets left, some offering full passes for under $1,000, which is much more in line with normal Formula One event prices. Temperatures were predictably near freezing at night, and efforts were made to prevent normal people from watching the race without paying tribute to our Liberty Media overlords. They had the audacity to demand that hotels on the Vegas Strip pay $1,500 per person who would have a view of the track. While this might seem insane because in Monaco, people in buildings with a view of the track aren't being told to pay just for the right to look out their own window, this does make a lot of sense for America, the land of the heated seat subscription. But the Americans weren't going to take this lying down, and the locals did us all proud when they tore down the materials being used to block their view of the track. Then FP1 rolls around, and as soon as the cars hit the track, it became abundantly clear that the organizers failed to do the part of their job known as organizing. Given that they insisted the race include the Las Vegas Strip, they were only able to book it at night. Since the time available at night was so limited, they weren't able to have any support races. And since there were no support races, it was Carlos Sainz who found out that they hadn't done basic track preparation items like securing drain covers. In other races, these are welded in place, covered, or removed entirely for the duration of the race. In Las Vegas, it flies off, causes $1.5 million in damage, and gives a 10-place grid penalty to the driver who qualified in second. As if that wasn't bad enough, it delayed the whole session, and they ended up kicking out paying spectators who only got to see 10 minutes of green flag time total. They weren't even offered a refund. People with Thursday-only tickets were offered a $200 voucher for official F1 merch, which is not even enough to buy 2 shirts, and people with full weekend passes weren't offered anything. That's the next place the organizers screwed up. They forgot they were in America, the land of fuck around and find out. And in this case, they found out they fucked up when they were slapped with a lawsuit 35,000 people strong the next day. You see, that's the problem when you try to cater to the rich instead of the masses. There are a lot of rich lawyers, and I'm sure every single lawyer in attendance had their pupils turn into cartoon dollar signs the moment they found out that Liberty Media had no intention of refunding them. So we have a substandard track, a ton of unsold tickets, Liberty losing their shirt monetarily, and weather that's too cold for F1 cars to get their tires into the optimal temperature window. All that's left now is the race, which will surely be somewhere between a dumpster fire and a train wreck. Right? Right? Unlike Fyre Festival, where the lead up to the event made it seem like everything was going to be fine, and then the moment you stepped off the plane, you could see that it wasn't, the Las Vegas Grand Prix kind of went in the opposite direction. Everything leading up to the event made it seem like it was going to be Fyre Festival 2.0, but then the cars got on track for the race and it was, I hate to say it, actually really good. Given how qualifying went, it seemed like there was going to be a bunch of crashes, which would cause safety cars, which would in turn cause more crashes. But that's not how it went. The cold track temperatures meant reduced grip, and Russell described it perfectly when he said it was like racing in the wet, because that was exactly the type of race we got. Close racing with the lead changing hands multiple times throughout the race, which is what we all love about wet races. And then there was that first lap incident with Max running Charles off the road, and it felt like the penalty that he got for that just wasn't enough because he could just pull a gap and it would become meaningless. But then the subpar track surface started chewing up his tires prematurely and he didn't end up pulling a gap. So he tumbled down the grid during those 5 stationary seconds and only barely caught back up to the leaders by the end of the race, which made the length of the penalty actually feel appropriate. Somehow, every bad thing about this event came together to make for an interesting and exciting race. And I think that's going to be the biggest problem. The organizers are going to take the wrong lessons away from all of this. They're going to point to how great the racing was and claim the whole thing was a success and try to put on a similar spectacle next year, but then they've completely missed the point. They got lucky that the drivers are professionals who managed to put on a great race in spite of all the compromises that were made in the name of the spectacle. Now that I think about it, this entire weekend has taken basically the same trajectory as Lance Stroll's career. It started off hopeful, then consistently failed to meet expectations, and now near the end gets a couple of good results, so it'll continue into next year, even though it probably shouldn't. And that's something else we need to talk about, the 10-year commitment Liberty Media supposedly has to this race. According to people in Las Vegas, everything was shut down this weekend. Restaurants were empty, shows were dark, and people were being told to just stay away this weekend unless they were attending the race. The businesses on the Las Vegas Strip are 24/7, 365 money-making machines, and they're going to be lobbying their government hard to stop this race from happening again. And if there's one thing I know about America, it's that lobbying is very effective. Most of the casinos on the Vegas Strip are owned by 2 companies, MGM Resorts and Caesars Entertainment. The CEOs at these 2 companies are going to look at their charts next year, look at this weekend, and then proceed to lose their shit over how much money they lost. Then, the very next thing they're going to do is whip up political will to cancel the race going forward. I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat here and predict that a bunch of grassroots organizations with mysterious funding will pop up very shortly to advocate against the Las Vegas Grand Prix. And even if they are just astroturfing, I'm not sure I blame them. There is no reason why they couldn't just build a proper track outside the city. There is no reason why the cars had to go down the Las Vegas Strip. There is no reason why it had to be during a cold night in November. This was clearly dreamed up by a bunch of lizards who have never felt proper human emotions in real life scenarios and think that the way they feel when they're watching a movie is the way they'll feel in real life. So they're trying to imagine picturesque scenes that will evoke strong emotions, like F1 cars racing down the Las Vegas Strip. They don't realize that in real life, you don't have background music to tell you how to feel. And the closest they're ever going to get to feeling like they're in Hollywood is when they do coke in a boardroom and pitch stupid ideas that they think will make $1 billion. And now, here to give you that special little treat at the end of the video, it's the Canadian positivity guy with the spicy joke of the week.
Well, you've heard the British guys enough, so why don't you listen to somebody else for a change?
Lance Stroll pulled off P5 in Las Vegas, but what he couldn't pull off is his new facial hair. That goatee makes him look so skeezy. Like the kind of guy who doesn't wash his face after he goes down because he likes it when his mustache smells like pussy.